At 19,000 1/6, basically between 2 and 3,000, every 2 to 3,000 down, I'll add another 1/6 position. That gives me basically the ability to accumulate all the way down sub $10,000. So for sure, number one, looking at the Bitcoin chart, to me, this is where a technical bounce should have occurred. A lot of people were surprised when Bitcoin went below the 19.5-ish 2017 high. But if you understand how markets work, they tend to just go a little bit beyond key levels because there's a lot of stops put there. They need to run those stops. They have to get the maximum people bearish before the bounce can occur. So we saw, for instance, some bankruptcies, Celsius, Voyager, and some other situations as well that were really adding to that bearish sentiment. And that kind of led right into this bounce in the near term. And I still think the market has more upside in Bitcoin. So for me, the first target I have on the upside in the near term is that this pivot low, which was the Terra Luna low, that's probably a near-term resistance level, right? We got close. We got within about $1,000, little over $1,000 away from that. But I still think that will get hit after such a dramatic move up in Bitcoin, where it went almost straight from 19,000 to 24. It makes a lot of technical sense why price needs to pause. So again, very just normal kind of pullback here. I do think there's another move up. If we take out this 25.5-ish area, then I think your next stop is all the lows from this area. This is going to be an epically big resistance level, right? So I can put a trend line right through there. And what you can also see here is that one of the things in technical analysis, and I know you know this, Steve, is that when you have a confluence of trend lines kind of converging, that's going to be a bigger resistance level in this case than one trend line. And so what you can see here is if you connect the high from 2021, November, and the high here, that trend line is getting very close to this area here. So my thought process is that I'm pretty certain, I would say 70-80% sure that we'll see the 25.5. I think there's probably a 60 to 70% chance we'll get up to 28 and change here. But this is kind of my zone of where I think Bitcoin stalls out before the next leg lower. And again, I know people don't want to hear that. I don't blame them, but I do still think there is one more leg lower to flush out a lot of people that think the lows are. So if we take this high to this low, and then you see how the beautiful kind of channel, we had this beautiful parallel channel created. And then if you take that distance and you replicate it here from this high, it actually takes us down to about 12 to 13,000. 12 to 13,000 also happens to be this pivot over here, right in this zone, as well as this area right down here as well. So right kind of in this groove. So that's kind of part of the reasoning. I also think that I worry that we haven't seen enough hardship in the crypto sector. So one of the things that I pay attention to is, seeing Voyager, seeing Celsius. I mean, those are things that naturally have to occur, but I still think that you haven't seen enough of it. It bothers me that Michael Saylor, there hasn't been, it got down to 21,000. He then said, oh, my level's much, much lower. The markets almost tend to kind of squeeze those people. And it doesn't seem like MicroStrategy has been squeezed yet, or some of these other players out as well. And I still think there's far too many cryptocurrencies for a healthy market. So for me, when we got down, so I've always said since we were at 69, 68,000 is that there would be a time where I start accumulating a HODL position, right? And so what I did was, and this goes to your point too, is like, I don't know where the low is going to be. Maybe it is the low. It's very, very possible that the low is already in. And so what I did was, when we got to 19,000, I started what I would consider to be a 1/6 position of what I want to accumulate of my HODL position. So again, if you think about it, let's say $120,000 is what I want to HODL on Bitcoin. I put in 20,000 at 19,000, and I'm just going to leave that there, because if this is the bottom and we go to 100 to 500, I do want to have exposure. And I think we're low enough when we got below 20 where it's smart to, even if it goes to 12, if you're in at like 19, 18, 20, it's not that big of a deal versus if you're in at 65,000. Then it's like major pain, especially if you're in that dollar cost averaging mode, like what I'm looking to do. And I'd also like to just point out is if you go to this Amazon chart here, And let me get rid of some of these short-term lines because I want to show you guys that longer-term chart. But if we go to let's go to the monthly chart. So if we go to the monthly chart and you just look at where Amazon was in the dot-com era, right? So this is the M top that Bitcoin kind of has. So even if Bitcoin does correct down 80, 85, 90%, look at where Amazon went afterwards, right? So here it is down here, .coms, down at 13 cents. This is obviously post-split. And then look at where it goes to. It goes to like $190. I mean, think about the X times of this. And then again, did it matter when Amazon was at 13 cents? What if you bought it at 20 cents? What if you bought it at 25 cents? Doesn't at this stage, it doesn't matter. So I think that basically comes from 20 years of trading experience, where in my first 5 years as attempting to become a profitable trader, I found that when I would go all in and say, oh, I'm going to be right on this level, the market always made me look the fool. And so I adjusted that. I kind of looked at my trading journal and my kind of thought process and how my results were coming out. And I saw that, wait a minute, when I would buy all in here of my full position, 70 to 80% of the time it would go below that. And sometimes a lot below that, where I would be in a lot of pain before it kind of played out, right? So the idea is that I learned from those, and I said to myself, listen, if I just buy a percentage of what I want to own, and then I space out my buys methodically, I'll do much, much better. And I have. My win rate has soared because of that kind of thought process. So what I'm doing, and that's kind of the thought process there. And again, it just helps me keep emotion at a minimum. And emotion is the worst thing as a trader can have. You have to be robotic. You have to just say, okay, these are the facts. So when you tend to go in a full position, you're like on the edge of your seat right away, versus when you're in a 1/6, it's like, okay, if it goes down 3,000, no big deal. I almost want it to go down 3,000 because I want to continue to accumulate. And if it doesn't and it goes to 100,000, I'm still making great money anyways. And it's that mentality of being defensive as a trader that I think made the big difference in my trading career versus being offensive. The thing is it's normal to have those emotions, but the best thing to do is to always go back to the chart and just look at something. So like, you go back to the 2021 high over here in November, and one of the things I stress, and I know you guys stress it too, is you don't want to be one of those chasers, right? And so when you had you're basically piercing double top, and I understand the breakout mentality, but at the same time, you also have to look at where it came from. And you have to say that, okay, listen, like literally in 3 weeks, Bitcoin went from 40,000 to 65, 66,000. And then you kind of see what you really start to look for. And you can see here, so we had this initial drop, then a lot of chop. And by the way, for me, this is kind of where I think we are in Bitcoin. So this is 2017. My guess is we're kind of right in this area here, right? We just bottomed out. We're going to kind of do this. And then I think you might just get that one last dip, which will be the bottom level. This will kind of flush people out, that final flush that'll occur. But really what you can see here is you traded sideways for a long period of time before that last flush. And then it was a beautiful rounded bottom. And again, there's not going to be anything you're going to be able to find that's going to be like, aha, this is 100% a bottom. But it's more just, again, saying, okay, we have a rounded bottom, and then you start seeing, okay, once you start taking out some of these former levels, like to me, that would be something that I would watch, is this was a very, very keen level. Once we got above there, notice how Bitcoin really got some serious upside action. Now, again, did we come back and retest it later on? Absolutely. Right here, you retested it, but it quickly recovered again and got back above that level. But again, things like rounded bottoms, cup and handle patterns, little things like that, and taking out former support that are now resistance levels, those would be things that I would look for when it finally bottoms out, plus the emotional kind of capitulatory, free, panic, oh my goodness, is Bitcoin going to survive type mentality.